Welcome to the Leading Hope Podcast with Kevin Jack. Your influence will lead people somewhere, lead them towards hope. Everyone has 20 minutes to learn to become a better leader. Make it count.
Welcome to Leading Hope with Kevin Jack. I'm your host, VJ Williams, here with my friend and pastor, Kevin Jack. Thank you for joining us and taking time out of your day to become a better leader. We release a new episode every Wednesday, so we'd love for you to share on social media and bring others along with us on this journey of becoming a better leader. Visit leadinghope.online to get updates and find out more about the Leading Hope community. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. Or if you haven't subscribed, it would mean the world to us if you did that now. Also, post about it, rate and review. You won't believe how that helps get this podcast in the hands of so many more leaders just like you. Also, we're live every Wednesday on Facebook and YouTube every week at 11:30, so you can share that now if you'd like. If you have a question, add that in the chat and we'll try to get to it. But today, Kevin, we're starting a new series. You want to tell us what the series is?
So the title of the series that we're kicking off today is Leading with a Microphone.
Oh, yeah, you couldn't help yourself. I know, Leading with a Microphone. But today you've titled this message, 3 questions. This is episode 70, by the way.
Episode 70.
70 today. We're excited. But 3 questions for public speaking.
3 questions. So we're going to cover a bunch of stuff that I'm really excited about in this series. Next episode, we're going to talk about how not to be boring. Pretty important. The third one, we're going to talk about a system for structuring your content called the VPS. And the last one in the series, we're going to discuss the differences between a 5-minute talk and a 40-minute talk.
Ooh.
And what you need to know is the difference between there. But I want to jump into this. A lot of the stuff that we have done on the podcast, honestly, it's stuff I wanted to learn about. Stuff I wanted to research and collect some thoughts. And this is one that I don't know, I feel like I know something about. I didn't have to research this one a lot. Like, this is kind of what I do, is the public speaking part. And the reality is this, is that as a leader, eventually your leadership will come with a microphone. At some point in time, whether it's 10 people who are in a meeting, whether it's 1,000 people who are gathered for a conference or something, like, eventually, not just if you're in ministry, okay, because I am a pastor, so this is a regular part of my leadership, but if you are a leader, eventually you will be called on to lead with a microphone, to get up in front of the group or just project your voice really loud and to do what we refer to as public speaking. And this weird thing happens in people's minds that as soon as their leadership drifts into the area of public speaking, it is like they forget what they're supposed to do. We get so concerned, and for many people, we get so obsessed with the public speaking part of it that we forget what our role is. And I understand that. Jerry Seinfeld famously said that death is actually people's second greatest fear. Their first greatest fear is public speaking, which, as Jerry Seinfeld says, means they would rather be in the casket than delivering the eulogy at the funeral. It's one of my favorite things. But we get so psyched out about this idea of public speaking that as a leader, we would go, hey, if you were called to lead a meeting or to manage an event or to drive a discussion or to fully see an initiative to its execution, you would know what you were doing as a leader. Those are different skill sets, but you fully know what you're doing as a leader. For some reason, when you hand people a microphone or when you get someone up on a platform, they completely forget that they are a leader and that the only reason why they have that platform is because of their position as a leader. We get so hyped up, the fact that we're speaking publicly, that we forget that we are also a leader.
That's
now,
good.
This isn't true for paid public speakers. That's not who we're talking about. We're talking about people for their leadership. So I want to say this to start off. Your purpose is greater than don't be boring. That's what most people think. I have to give a speech. Oh my goodness, how can I not be boring? Now, as we're going to get into in the very next episode, don't be boring. Please, don't waste people's time. It doesn't matter what your personality is. You go, well, I'm kind of boring to begin with. No, you can still not be boring. And I want to show you how you can not be boring. But your responsibility in that moment is so much greater than don't be boring. You have the opportunity to move people in a direction. So don't see leading with a mic as an obligation. See it as an opportunity. When else can you align so many people towards the vision? When else can you clearly communicate current initiatives, current priorities, a value that needs elevated, a habit that needs extinguished? Like, there is such an incredible opportunity through the medium of public speaking. And some people, they are so psyched out about, I don't want to be boring, I'm nervous about doing this, I don't know how to do this, to go, no. You miss the potential in the moment. So don't see it as an obligation, see it as an opportunity. So I want to give you 3 key questions that you need to go through. Understanding that you cannot divorce your role as leader from your current task as public speaker. And I'll get into this in just a second. Like, every weekend when I give a message, I am very clear on what my role as a leader is within the church, and so what the message itself needs to do. Now, I want to say in there, I don't want to be boring. Yeah. It is a high goal of mine not to be boring, but I have goals that supersede simply being interesting. So, 3 questions to help you guide this to make sure you are fully inhabiting your role as the leader. Number 1, what impact does this speech need to make? This should not be a hard question for you as a leader, but it's the question most people never ask. What impact does this speech need to make? What's the area in our organization that needs the most improved? What is the thing unclear that needs clarified? Where do we need training? Where do we need motivation? Where do we need insight? Where do we need outside perspective? Where do we need to change behaviors? What is the impact that this speech needs to make? Second one, what can I realistically do? You will not get people to do 4 different things outside of a speech. At best, you're going to get them to do 1. Okay, so if you put 4 down there, at best, they will remember the last one. Most likely, they will forget all of them. Is you need to go, not everything that needs to be done. What can this 5-minute period of time, 30-minute, 40, whatever it is, what can this realistically do? What one thing could this speech realistically do? And then the third question now becomes a method of implementation. How am I going to do that? What am I going to say? What stories am I going to tell? What mediums am I going to use? What people am I going to pull at? What creative devices? How am I going to do that? And this question must come last, because your approach should come out of your purpose. For most of us, what we do is we go, how am I going to fill this amount of time? So what should I talk about, and what can I leave them with? We ask the right questions, but we ask them in the completely wrong order. The questions you need to ask are, what impact does this speech need to make? What can I realistically do? And how am I going to do that? Now, let me give you just a quick side note. Okay, so if you are speaking outside your organization, if you're not speaking to your team or your people or anything like that, the question that you need to ask primarily is, how can I be helpful?
Oh, that's good.
It's just simply going, hey, what can I bring? What insight do I have? What expertise? What unique perspective do I have? Again, it's not, how can I not be boring? If you are asked to come outside your organization to speak to a different group, the number one thing on your head is just simply, how can I be helpful to these people? How can I add value to them in their lives? Now, again, as a note, if you're boring, you're not helpful, okay?
Yeah.
If you put everyone to sleep, you have not added values outside of a slight nap within there. So, but I want you to know this, most of all, because there's this weird thing that goes on in our heads anytime we're going to talk to a small group, because we think everyone is so concerned about how interesting we'll seem, and that is not the case. They're focused on themselves. And so to say, hey, you are not a public speaker. You are a leader who is speaking publicly. Don't divorce your role and purpose from your current task. You wouldn't do this if it was a meeting or anything else. It's the same with public speaking, okay? You are a leader. That's why you're there. Move people in the direction they need to go.
That's great. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this series.
Oh, I'm so excited about this series.
And if you're a leader at any point in your life, today or tomorrow, this is going to be something that you're going to want to be part of. Ryan Stroop did say this just a little bit ago. He said, you're doing more live podcast. I feel very, very, very slightly responsible, which I think's hilarious.
I love Ryan Stroop. Hi, Ryan.
And Rick Beaver says, love that. Not an obligation, but an opportunity.
Thank you, Rick.
That's awesome. Here's one thing I want you to do a little bit deeper dive into is how do we cast vision in the midst of messages?
Oh, that's good. That's so good. So I am very clear so I speak every weekend for anyone who doesn't know my role. I'm a senior pastor, and so that's just one of the things I do. I speak for 40-ish minutes, somewhere within there. My team will make jokes that it's much longer, 40 to 50 minutes. And so I actually have a checklist that I go through when I'm prepping the message, okay? So every weekend when I'm prepping content, my initial question is not, what can I do that's interesting this weekend?
Yeah.
I'm asking, where are our people?
Oh, that's great.
This is a slightly more spiritual sense, but I am a pastor.
Yep.
Is, where are our people? What is God saying to our people? And how should we respond to that? But as part of my list, I literally have a checklist that is, how can I communicate our values? And I list out all our values. How can I communicate our vision? And I list out the key pieces of our vision. And what are the key steps we can take forward as a church out of this? I have that in a template. Every message I prep, I'm going through that. So I want to make sure that what we're doing is helpful for people in the moment, but also done in light of this much larger perspective of where we're headed as a church to ensure that we're going the right direction.
Yeah.
So it's this piece of, you asked the question, let me hit it on this answer.
Yeah.
Every message, every speech should communicate vision without it having to be entirely about vision.
Yeah.
Like, I think for some pastors specifically, they'll go, this is the vision message.
Yeah.
Well, that's every message.
Yeah.
Like, it should be every message that is on where you're headed and how you're getting
I love
there.
that. It's part of the DNA of what you're doing every week.
Yeah, it must be a part of the flow.
That's great. I've got another question here coming in from YouTube. Dina asks, what about different audiences? Is it important to know your audience, whether it is a different age group, special groups, or organizations?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think that's where there's such a subtle shift on speaking to your team. You know your team. You know your people. You know your organization. When you're going outside, that question of how can I be helpful needs to be seen in light of what do they struggle with.
Yeah.
And so that's, for me, has been, hey, when I get an invite, I will ask, what do you want me to speak on? And they'll say, whatever you want. And I go, no, like, tell me. And sometimes it's been a really interesting process because I get to do a little consulting within the invite. Like, where are you struggling? What are you trying to do? And sometimes people haven't thought that through and they're like, well, I don't know. Well, let's talk about it because that's where I can add the most value.
Yeah, that's good. Keep them coming if you have any more questions. Throw those in the chat.
Hey, can we acknowledge this is a significant podcast milestone? We got a question.
We got a question.
Thank you.
Great work. Great work. You said this. I wanted to get back to this piece here. You said people abdicate their role because of fear of public speaking, and I can guarantee a few people that are watching this that is their fear. Like, they're leading something, right? They're leading something of significance.
Yeah.
But they're like, ooh, public speaking or getting in front of people. This is bad news. I don't want it. Any part of that. I can just tell a few people what to do and remove myself. But you said that people abdicate their role because of fear of public speaking. They overhype it. They forget that they have the mic because of their role, which should dictate what they do. Just give a few more pieces about that and why it's important to not do that.
We get so caught up in our own perception. Like, I don't know many people who, like, they led a meeting, they're like, going there, how'd I do? How was that?
Yeah.
Was that okay? Was that too boring?
Yeah.
Like, no, we just lead meetings.
Right.
And for some reason, when we get to public speaking, and I believe it's an art, I believe it's a craft,
Sure.
I believe it's a skill set, I believe all those other things. But to acknowledge the reason why you got invited to step up there and were handed a microphone, if that's the case, is because you're the leader. And so step up there as the leader. Don't try to be Tony Robbins. Be the leader.
Yeah.
Like, don't try to be the last TED Talk that you saw and just, oh, that was crazy. No, just be the leader. Do the thing that you need to do to move people forward.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point that we probably should just make sure that everyone's clear on, is that you're talking about not becoming a public speaker.
Yeah.
You're talking about what it looks like to get better at speaking publicly.
Absolutely.
That's what it is. It's not you're trying to become. That's a great thing.
Your leadership role will eventually involve public speaking.
Yeah.
In that moment, don't become a different person.
That's right.
Be who you are
so good.
and do the role that you are called to do.
That's so good. I love that. I mean, because at the end of the day, we overcomplicate the message to seem interesting instead of being specific to what we're an expert on.
Can I give you, this is going to preview a thing. So I've got a thing at the end that's 5 minutes versus 40 minutes, which I think applies to every organization. In church world, most churches commonly have a host. Like they have not just someone who gives the sermon, they have someone who hosts. And I have lived through hosts all of my church ministry. I've been a host sometimes. Yeah. And it amazed me how often the hosts didn't always understand their role. As I go, when I hosted, I just get up there and I just tell jokes.
Yeah.
Because that was fun. But that's not what they needed me to do.
Right.
And so I did the thing that I wanted to do instead of the thing they needed me to do. And you have to know what the organization, what the moment needs you to do.
Yeah. What does the moment call for?
Yeah.
And fulfill that. One other thing I want to ask you, and we're going to run out of time here soon, but I want to ask this because it's going to lead into next week. So if you're listening right now, this will help get you back here next week. You said, basically, I'm wrapping this up for you, boring and helpful doesn't coexist.
Yeah.
Talk more about that and why it's so important that you don't need to be you're not Dave Chappelle every time you get up there. Like it's not that. You don't have to be completely, just from start to finish, completely interesting. But you can't be boring either. Talk about that dynamic.
Yeah, I would say it as, and this will really preview what we're going to get into next week, is to go when we make the unhealthy mind shift and all of a sudden we go, no, I'm no longer speaking publicly. I'm now pretending to be a public speaker. We over-focus on style instead of content. Content is what's engaging. Like, content is what's interesting. We'll hit that a lot harder next week on the how not to be boring.
Yeah.
But there's a piece of it that goes, so we could just say this bluntly. If you are boring, you're not going to help someone.
Yeah.
But if your focus is on not being boring, you will not help anyone.
Right.
Because you're going to overemphasize style over content.
That's good. Hey, we do have one more question. I think we can get this in. And I think you hit this a little bit.
Two questions?
Yes. Donna's
World
asking
record.
this. She says, public speaking fear is melting with practice, but acknowledging myself as a leader is the hang-up. She'd love for us to talk more about that so people don't realize that they're actually leading something as a speaker in the moment. And I think you really press that the whole way through.
Yeah. So let's just, terminology or a metaphor from kind of my neck is to go, our common tendency when we start to play sports is we imitate our favorite players. Like we do. I had a buddy growing up. He loved Albert Pujols. We would play slow pitch softball, and he'd unstrap and restrap his batting gloves every time because it was like,
it's a rhythm.
Stop it.
Yep.
That just was another thing entirely. It's a weird thing because when we become a public speaker, we automatically want to imitate our favorite public speakers and go, oh, I want to be this. I want to do that. And so I would just say it as, don't get this overly grand picture of what you're doing. And I know that sounds off, okay? I know that sounds different because I believe what you're doing matters.
Yep.
Don't try to make this massive stage and everything else. Don't get caught up in all that. Be helpful to the person there. And so you go, hey, I don't know if I'm a leader or not. Can you be helpful?
Yeah.
Then you are.
Yeah.
Can you help someone
That's
in that
great.
moment? Then you are leading them.
So good.
And everyone can be helpful.
That's great, man. I love that. That's a great takeaway.
Can we just acknowledge also, though, that we are not the podcast? Like, when we started this live thing, it was as a desire to be helpful, to be more responsive.
Yeah.
And so we're not the people who are like, we got 5,000 people on, questions galore.
Yeah.
Like, we got 2 questions today. Thank you so much.
Yep, we're excited. We're excited. But hey, listen, we're going to wrap up. It's episode 70. We're in a brand new series. This is going to be fun.
So fun.
3 questions for public speaking. Wrap it up.
So, at the end of the day, remember, when you have a mic, when you have a platform, you are a leader. Be helpful. Don't give in to the idea of, it's got to be this and this and this. Be helpful in the moment.
That's awesome. Thank you guys for joining us today. If you're new to the podcast or haven't yet subscribed, it would mean the world to us if you did that now. Also, post about it, rate and review, or both. You won't believe how that helps get this podcast in the hands of so many more leaders like you. We love hearing your stories of how the podcast is working in your life and business or in your home. If you have a story, visit leadinghope.online and send that to us. We just want to hear from you. We love hearing your stories every week. It's been great. And remember, everyone has 20 minutes to learn to become a better leader. Make it count.